Welcome to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze, bringing you all the Jewish entertainment news and movie reviews anyone can use. I'm your host, Amanda Borschel-Dan, with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman, straight from New Jersey.
Hello. That's my big hello. I'm excited for this
That
week.
was a really big hello.
Yeah, I'm excited for this week because it's Passover week. And we are recording actually on Easter Monday, and I'm really excited for this week's pick, a movie which I have not seen in over 40 years, which I watched this week. And a lot of it was as I remembered, and a lot of it was as I did not remember. But it did not include When Moses was in Egypt land, let my people go. I actually did think that was from this movie, The Ten Commandments. I had somehow projected, it was like the Mandela effect when it wasn't in there. I thought there was a scene where Nubians, Woody Strode plays the black Nubian king at one point. I thought in my head he sang that, the old, as they called it, Negro spiritual. Totally made up in my head somehow. So we're going to get to that though. But The Ten Commandments is this week's film, and what a picture, as they say.
Jordan, I just feel like you launched right in. People have no idea what we're supposed to be doing unless they know how to read, which is possible. And they read the headline for this episode. So yes, it is 70 years to the Ten Commandments, which I had never, ever seen, of course. And so we decided, it was actually, I have to give all credit to my assistant, Yaakov, whom we bring up all the time. Yeah. But in any case, he said, why don't you do this film for its 70th anniversary? And I thought, oh my Lord, it is almost 4 hours long. How am I going to do this? But I'll tell you how you do it. You do it in 3 installments.
Wow. Okay, cool. 3 is not, I thought it was going to be much worse. I thought you were going to say I did it in 6.5 installments, but 3 is not so bad. I watched it in 3 installments too. I broke it up. Probably 3 is what I did as well, which is right, I think. So anyhow, but before we get to that, you had some,
yes.
You had some news. You had a Jangle news, right?
Yes, I have a Jangle news, and I think you have a Jangle news as well, but I'll go first because I'm the lady and also the editor, and also can edit everything and make it so that I go first. But in any case, we're going to let me go first. And Modi, the comedian that we discussed in our previous episode.
Just 1 week ago.
Out he was, well, I think it was actually 2 weeks because we skipped actual Passover week.
Right.
And we decided to have our recording on Easter. It is actually Sunday. It's not Monday, but I think you're a little foggy because it's a little early where you are. But in any case, Easter Sunday, we're recording, and we're going to release this episode on the second holiday of Passover, the 7th day of Passover. Anyway, so Modi, the comedian we discussed in our previous episode. So he was in the news for a couple of reasons. One, he was on Jimmy Fallon, which is, an achievement for any comedian. That's a way to go, Modi. But also because he was set to appear at a Passover event alongside New York's mayor, Mamdani. He apparently didn't know that Mamdani was set to appear. And so when Modi found out, he dropped out of the event. So he made news for that as well.
Modi dropped out. He wasn't told to drop out. He
Correct.
I don't know. I mean, I am not the world's biggest fan of Mr. Mamdani, but I don't know. Maybe he should have just, my gut reaction is you show up and you do your thing. I love Modi's comedy. Maybe somebody whispered in his ear, you really shouldn't do it because if you go, your ticket sales are going to plummet. But I mean, if he had already agreed to go, I feel like there's more to this than meets the eye. We need to find the whole story here. But
well, according to the Times of Israel,
I'm familiar with that website.
Very reputable source.
Yeah.
Okay. It said Modi will no longer be attending, a statement on his social media said ahead of the event.
All I can say is that 2 weeks ago, I was very pro Modi. I thought he was really, really funny. Something about this leaves a sour taste in my mouth. I feel like I'd like to know more before I issue judgment. But I don't know. I kind of feel like if I'm Modi and I'm planning to do an event, and just because Zohran's there, I mean, he's the mayor of New York, nothing you can do. If he's doing it, you walk 10 feet in New York, you're going to come across anti-Zionists and hardcore left-wing people. That's just what that city is about. I feel like you don't stand down. You proudly do your thing. So I'd like to learn more. I'm not passing judgment, but I am issuing an announcement that I would like to know more. How does that sound?
That sounds fine. And I will just mention that since we had just discussed Modi, several of our listeners reached out to me immediately when they heard of this scandal, I guess, or this jangle at least, and sent me the news. So I really appreciated that. And please keep the emails coming.
Yeah,
we really appreciate them.
Yeah.
Now, Jordan.
Yeah.
You have a jangle?
Yeah, I did. And actually, I learned this news from the Times of Israel also. I was looking at it on my phone in the morning before I brushed my teeth. And I saw that a woman by the name of, and I want to pronounce her, Suki Lahav had passed away. Have you heard of Suki Lahav? Okay, so Suki Lahav.
Well, I saw it on the Times of Israel. And since my boss, who is also your boss, shall I say, an extension, is such an amazingly huge fan of the Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah, Bruce Springsteen.
Yes, we have heard of Suki Lahav.
Yeah, so Bruce Springsteen, of course, is not a Jewish man, but he has a lot of Jewish connections, and one of them over the years was Suki Lahav, who was briefly in the E Street Band, but played some key roles. She passed away. She was unfortunately not that old. She was I think in her mid-70s. She was born in Israel, I believe, raised in a kibbutz even, and was then in the USA for a little while, but then went back to Israel and was a lyricist and poet and writer and musician. But she played the violin and sang backup vocals on some of the early Springsteen albums, and also was on tour with him. Her two biggest claim to fame, I guess, the two songs that she's most associated with. She's the backup vocalist, the woman voice you hear in the song Sandy. I'm not going to sing it. Sandy. All right, I will sing it a little bit. The one with the accordion. It's very boardwalk beach coded. It's one of the classic songs. But then also, she's the opening notes you hear, the violin notes you hear on Jungle Land, which is, I think at the end of the day, tied for first place as my favorite Springsteen song. Probably that's
okay,
many fans'
Jordan,
favorites. Yeah.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah. You don't know.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah?
But I really don't know the oeuvre. I have to say.
You've heard Jungle Land in the car. It's like a big epic. It's kind of what Springsteen was known for, is writing these big songs with lots of characters. It starts out slow, then it goes fast. It builds to a crescendo, a big saxophone solo. And anyway, so Suki Lahav was the woman, and she toured with him for many years. And so he issued a nice statement where he said that he wrote here on E Street, which is the metaphorical land of Springsteen-related goodness, but it is a real street, by the way. E Street is a real street in Belmar, New Jersey. It's just a street. Bunch of houses on that street, but I have taken a picture of the sign many times. Here on E Street, he writes, we're heartbroken over the passing of Suki Lahav. Her angelic voice shone on 4th of July Asbury Park, also known as Sandy, and her beautiful violin brought great drama to the Jungle Land intro. She blessed our stage with her beauty and grace in our early touring years. She was a wonderful friend. May she rest with the angels. And then she was replaced in the group by a woman by the name of Susie Terrell, who is still with the group to this day. She is the kind of the violinist and also backup singer. But Susie Terrell is most important to Bruce's life because she was the one who introduced Bruce to his wife, Patty Scialfa, to whom he's been married now for decades and decades and has 3 wonderful children and even some grandchildren. And Patty's going through some health issues right now. We wish her only the best. And I guess I know a little bit too much about Bruce Springsteen. I am a big fan. And Bruce, of course, is in the news right now. You know, he's tussling with the other boss, Donald J. Trump. Are you familiar with what's going on there? See, it doesn't make the news over there because you've got actual problems over there. You got missiles flying over your head and whatnot. You're running to bomb shelters. But right now, Bruce is on tour, and he is vocally Bruce is a patriot, and he begins his show by talking about how he loves America. And he believes on the ideals in which America was founded on, and he wishes to see a new type of leadership in this country, which is not based on totalitarianism and fear and all these things. And he's speaking bluntly about the current president. And then the president responded in a what he calls the Truth Social. And he called Bruce a shriveled up prune who has had one too many plastic surgeries, which I don't know what plastic surgery Bruce has had, whether there's no record of it. And then he said, and his tickets are too expensive anyhow. That I agree with. Once in a while, I agree with Trump. The Springsteen tickets are too expensive. So anyway, the two are fighting. You figure Donald Trump, he's running a country. He's got the Straits of Hormuz he's got to open up. He's got a war happening. Remember, he kidnapped the president of Venezuela? What happened to that guy? He just forgot that story. That guy's going to never see air again. He's stuck in prison for the rest of his life. But he's got time to yell at the boss, man. He's got time to yell at Springsteen. Give me a break.
Well, priorities, it seems like he has it all lined up. All right. So we are going to go to a break, and then we're going to discuss very thoroughly the 10 Commandments. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. So initially, we were supposed to review an Israeli movie that's in the news, and we will.
Eventually.
We will get to it.
Yeah.
It's called Yes by Nadav Lapid. But I was a little daunted by watching 2.5 hours of controversial Israeli film. And then we decided to go down the 3-hour, 40-minute route of the 10 Commandments, which I don't know if that makes me a hypocrite or what. But in any case, we watched it. I actually pre-watched with The Prince of Egypt. Our 4.5-year-old had never seen it, so we watched that with him first.
Oh, wow.
A day prior to starting
Okay.
the 10 Commandments. And it was really interesting to compare and contrast the two films, which I would say arguably are, I don't know, the foundation of most people's knowledge of the Exodus story today. Would you agree with that?
Of course. Yeah, absolutely. I think Prince of Egypt more so than the nearly 4-hour, very dated and stylized Charlton Heston starring 10 Commandments, certainly.
Yeah. So it was really interesting to see which film kept closer to the text, because I was watching with my husband, who is, as I've mentioned before, a biblical Hebrew scholar. And so we discussed, which actually stuck to the storyline a little more closely and which didn't.
Yeah.
What would you guess, Jordan?
Well, I Prince of Egypt is probably 102 minutes, so they're streamlined. So maybe they do hit the bullet points more. I mean, there are certainly more talking animals, I would imagine, in Prince of Egypt. But the 10 Commandments, I mean, I don't know. Were Jethro's daughters really like that? I mean, I couldn't say. But I don't know. Is Prince of Egypt kind of more? Does it hew more to the what's in the Bible? Is that the punchline here, or?
No, quite the opposite,
Oh, okay.
actually. The
All
Prince
right.
of Egypt takes a lot more
Okay,
liberties,
good.
though I believe they base a lot of it off of Midrash. So it's, it's all interpretation.
Yeah.
But the 10 Commandments, and I mean, for example, just to give a concrete example, if you remember the first several miracles, Moses hands off his staff to his brother Aaron.
That's right.
And Aaron actually completes the miracle, right? Whereas in the Prince of Egypt, it was Moses, Moses, Moses.
Yeah.
All the time, Moses.
Didn't want to share the love.
Yeah.
Didn't
So-
want to share the love.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, Jordan,
Yeah.
my first time watching it, I loved it. And as I said, we watched it over 3 different days.
Yeah.
And so we were really in suspense, I would say, between the different viewings. And my husband and I were kind of like, okay, when are we going to have time to watch the next installment?
Yeah. We need to see
I found it crazily feminist and anti-feminist at the same time. So we could talk about that.
Well,
for sure.
that's classic Hollywood right there. There is a lot of that you'll find in a big fat Hollywood epic like this, where they make the women brassy and kind of modern and yes, she wants it her way, but then it's also but they dress her up like a painted doll and all she cares about is men, and there's a lot of the back and forth. I will say I have a fondness for big, dumb Hollywood blockbuster, Technicolor stupidity. I mean, I think it's always been a soft spot for me. particularly sandal epics. I love them, be they about the Old Testament or the New. And this is probably the biggest of them. This or Ben-Hur, which also happens to have Charlton Heston playing a Jew. Those are probably the two biggies. And this one, at the time it was made, it was the most expensive movie ever made, and then it was among the biggest financial successes of all time. It remains so. It is, to my surprise, still aired on ABC network television in the U.S. Every Easter or Passover week, depending on when it falls on the calendar. In my memory, it was something that was split up over 2 nights, but according to my research, it was not. It was always shown in one shot. So they'd started at at 6 and ended in time for the 11 o'clock news. So it'd be over 4 hours with commercials. I guess split over 2 nights. Maybe they did that with Ben-Hur or something. And I did as a kid. It was something where I don't know that I actually sat down and ever watched it from beginning to end, but over the years, it was something you'd catch bits of, and it was helpful to as a young me at the Seder, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know about this part from the movie. I'm like, oh, I remember this. Charlton Heston says this. So it's kind of funny. Watching it again now as an adult for the first time, I was taken with the racier aspects of it, which flew over my head at the time. Primarily Anne Baxter's performance as Nefretiri, Moses' would-be girlfriend and then later wife of the Pharaoh, who is just, vamping it up and just like practically like Eartha Kitt as Catwoman, just rare and very, very, very saucy and risque and prurient, as they say, which was very lost on me as a child. I found her performance hilarious. And every time she wasn't on screen, I'm like, bring back Nefretiri. Not just because of what she was wearing. I just thought she was really great. And also Jethro's daughters that are all just like, ooh, it's a man. We found a man in the bush. Oh, dear. And and they're all doing the dance for him and whatnot. I had somehow forgot. When I was 6, that did not make an impression on me, but I thought that was particularly amusing. But one thing, of course, that did make an impression on me is just the look. I mean, big Technicolor 1950s. Just the gorgeous gowns and the sets and the special effects and the interior sets, the exterior, which they did shoot in Egypt, which was a big deal at the time to do a production like that. And, the classic cast of thousands, this was Cecil B. DeMille's final production as a director. And, literally thousands of extras in some shots and thousands of sheep and goats and whatnot, and the bigness of it still comes through. And they don't make them like that anymore. There is a huge industry now today in what you would call faith-based films, and this story is being retold, and both from the Old and New Testament constantly. But these are niche productions with small budgets. They're not they can sometimes cross over to mainstream, and they can sometimes make a lot of money, but they're not Hollywood productions. So they don't have the production design, the money on screen. You don't see it, and so this is a hallmark from another time, and it really is great. Now the negatives to it. Or the acting is very stylized.
Wait, before you go on, yes,
yeah.
Of course, the acting. But before you go on, I want to define some terms.
Sure.
And you said Technicolor a couple times. Of course, we had sandal epic. That was a great term for the genre. But Technicolor. Now, if I'm watching it today, which I did, and the colors are so rich, is that what you mean by Technicolor? Or what is Technicolor?
I'm going to tell you, first of all, it's possible that this was actually not done, or it was done in the Technicolor process. The Technicolor process was in sort of an early, from this era. So we're talking 1950s. And it was just how it was shot. Now movies are all made on digital video. So the initial capture are all the same. And then there's manipulation after the fact. But back in the day, it was how you would actually shoot movies. The final look of it would be dependent oftentimes on what type of film you use to capture it, and then the process with which you developed the film to make it look the way it looked. And Technicolor was a process which, you know, I'm not studied up on this right now, so I can't tell you what it is specifically, but I believe it was the type of the way in which they use the dyes. Initially, I know it was like what was called a 3-color process. So those primary colors really blast out, and it's what makes everything look like jelly beans. Basically, they're all bright, and the images are just, you know, big. And so a lot of the early color movies, you know, were done in what was called the Technicolor process, and that's why they have that classic look. There were other processes too. So sometimes it's like Kleenex. You say Kleenex, but you just mean a tissue. So sometimes people say, "Oh, it was an old Technicolor film," and then a nerd goes, "Excuse me, technically it was not Technivision; it was the other." But this one was Technicolor, and that's so it's a certain kind of process, and it's a look that isn't done anymore, and that's why these older films have that very stylized look to it, and this is a prime example. You couldn't do any better than this one.
And you were talking about the spectacle, of course, and
Yeah.
it's no secret that I fall asleep in battle scenes.
Yes.
And so I have to admit that the Exodus, like the actual Exodus where the thousands are actually leaving Egypt,
Yeah.
I did snooze a little bit in that.
Yeah.
But the dance scenes were so fantastic. There are several dance scenes, not just Jethro and his daughters. It was the Pharaoh's court had several different scenes. And of course, you mentioned the Nubians and there's the Ethiopians. And it's just really such a spectacle that, again, as you said, we would not necessarily see today.
The only world from which you would see a movie kind of that has commonalities with this, and I'm being 100% serious, is Indian cinema. Indian movies are often 4 hours long, and they play they don't just play in India. They're if you live in a multiplex in, for example, Central New Jersey, as I do, which has a nice diverse population. The multiplex of 14 screens, one of those 14s is oftentimes an Indian movie, and you look and sometimes I think, oh, I should go see an Indian movie, and it's 4 hours long. I mean, that's just how they do. And they have dance breaks. These are dramatic films, but they also have musical numbers and dance breaks. This doesn't have a musical number in it per se, but that legacy lives on to a certain degree. The performances are, I read a quote when I was watching the film and was looking it up, that one of the actors, I think it was Yvonne De Carlo, who played Zipporah, she said, that Cecil B. DeMille, the director, came from the world of silent movies. He was first a silent filmmaker, and she described it, if it wasn't her, it was one of the other actors, she just described it as they were making a silent movie with talking. I mean, it's all face acting. It's all like finding the light, staying in profile, keeping your eyes wide, gesturing with your arms, and then speaking a line in a not particularly naturalistic way. It's like to the back of the house, big theatrical stuff. And it's funny. You almost could, once I read that quote, I was thinking about it. I mean, if you turn the volume down, you could certainly understand what everybody was feeling on screen. It is like silent film acting. But then you do hear them speak, and it's Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner just like belting out these lines that are just like, they're hilarious, they're corny, but they're also great. I mean, I was very lucky that, like I said, I was kind of raised on these movies. My mother has a great love for kind of cheesy, big Hollywood epics. So, she kind of force fed this and Ben-Hur and the other ones on me. So I have a sort of a nostalgia. I certainly was not alive to see these movies in first run, but I still have sort of a nostalgia for that style of acting. I mean, Charlton Heston, just booming baritone. He can be a good actor, Charlton Heston, but this is not really a good example of him being a good actor. This is a good example of him being a visible actor, a profoundly bold and present actor. Just shout, when he says, "Let my people go," it's almost like a joke. It's almost like you can almost see the Saturday Night Live parody of it. And when Jethro's daughters are washing his feet, am I being bathed or am I being drowned? It's just, And even just the other, like when they make pronouncements like the Jews shall now make bricks without straw. How can one make bricks without straw? It's just so very basic dialogue. It's really a lot of fun. But I could understand if you showed this to a young person today or anybody today, and they'd be like, I can't watch this. This is impossible. But if you get into it, it's a stylized thing, like a musical. I mean, there are some people who just hate musicals because they stop the movie and they start to sing, and it's just like, nah, I don't do it. I don't believe it. I don't buy that. But it's just a thing. I mean, we watch a superhero movie and they start to fly. You buy that. Why shouldn't you buy that, Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney are singing right now? So if you can do that, if you can get yourself in the headspace of this is, a heavily stylized sandal epic, then you're gonna like it.
The only kid who watched part of it is the 4.5-year-old.
Okay, yeah.
And he watched the final installment. He was enthralled.
Sure.
He thought it was amazing. And, because English isn't really his first language, I think the extreme diction was very good for him.
Yes.
He understood everything
That's a good point.
lot better.
Yeah.
But I would have to say, I loved Yul Brynner.
Yeah.
He is such a mystery to me. And his accent is, of course, way out of place in this film in terms of it doesn't match anyone else's.
No.
Including his father. Right? But
true.
the actor that... the actor I loved the most was kind of... a new discovery for me. He's been dead probably for, 60 years. Edwin G. Robinson. He played Dathan, right?
Wait, are you really not familiar with that name? You don't know anything about him? Well,
I've heard the name before,
Edward G.
but
Robinson.
I don't
Okay.
recall watching him act. And
awesome.
I thought he was just fabulous.
We have a lot to talk about. This is great. All right. Edward G. Robinson is not his birth name. His real name is Shmuley Rosenblatt. I don't know his real name. I'm going to tell you right now, but he is classic Hollywood, usually a bad guy. He was born Emmanuel Goldenberg. That is his real name, according to Wikipedia. So he is one of the classic early Hollywood superstars that was kind of changed his name. And he usually plays a gangster.
Wait. Jordan,
Yeah.
is he the guy who was like, I could have been a contender?
No.
With the
My
coin?
God, that was
I could have been somebody?
That was Marlon Brando.
Oh man, I'm terrible at this.
So Edward G. Robinson was one of these classic Hollywood, mostly gangster pictures. Little Caesar was a big famous one. His later he was in Double Indemnity from Billy Wilder, one of the great early Jewish writer directors. Double Indemnity is a great movie, and he actually plays a good guy in that. But so his appearance in this is like that. Yeah, that kind of the New York tough guy voice. It is a great thing because you see him dressed in. I mean, he looks like he's in a Halloween costume. I mean, he's dressed kind of, in this sort of like pretend Egyptian garb, and he's like a tough New York gangster. He plays a villain in this. He is I guess you'd call him a capo or something today. He is the Jew who betrays the other Jews to the Pharaoh. He rats out Moses, and then he later tries to undercut when Moses is up on the mountain receiving the texts from the Lord. He convinces the assembled Israelites to descend into madness and gluttony and whatnot. And but he's a great character.
That was a great scene, right? I mean, that is such a bacchanal.
They build a golden lamb or something, or a golden some kind of creature, graven image,
golden calf.
Golden
Jordan,
calf.
Come on,
Me.
golden calf.
That's
Oh my
right.
God.
Golden lamb, golden calf. And then just as they're building a golden calf, Moses is up on the mountain, hearing from the Lord, "Thou shalt not build golden calves." It's the actual opposite of what you should do. So yeah, he's pretty great. I mean, Yul Brynner is phenomenal, and of course, Yul Brynner is, like you say, he's sort of a mystery. That was sort of his hallmark as a Hollywood actor, is that he like Anthony Quinn could play anything because he was of mysterious ethnic background. Yul Brynner was from way east Russia, originally from Vladivostok, so as basically practically Japan, way east and so he had an ethnic look that was malleable. As Anthony Quinn, I believe he was Mexican, but he played everything. Ricardo Montalban also. I think Ricardo Montalban's performance as Khan in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan owes a little bit to Yul Brynner in the Ten Commandments, frankly. They're both very big and, odious, meanie. And of course, the great line, let it be written, let it be done, just is wonderful. But he's the only one that is, you could say, kind of, he's not Egyptian, but at least he kind of could pass for Egyptian. His father, of course, is played by Sir Cecil Hardwicke. It's something extremely British, the actor's name. And Sir Cecil Hardwicke, yeah, I mean, he does not look particularly Egyptian. None of them do. Charlton Heston does not look like he's from the region. Edward G. Robinson looks like he's from Hester Street, so it's kind of funny, classic Hollywood of just, not even bothering to I mean, Cecil B. DeMille had previously made Cleopatra with Claudette Colbert, right? So it's of the time, as they say. But Yul Brynner does really strike out. I mean, it's a great head-to-head, him and Charlton Heston, because they both have the goods. They're both shirtless most of the time, and there's a lot of shirtless men in this, and they're just wearing the outfits. But I think it works on Yul Brynner. He looks cool in the Egyptian headdress. He's holding a scepter and gesturing with his arms and whatnot. It's really marvelous. But like I said earlier, it is a type of filmmaking that is not for everybody.
Okay, let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our movie maven, Jordan Hoffman. Jordan, I'd like to talk about the lingering cultural resonance of this film. And I feel like it is just, in itself, it's made for parodying. You see this film and you can just say, this is almost a satire, so anything could really parody it quite easily. And I would imagine it has been done several times.
Yeah, well, we talked about it earlier on the Reel Schmooze when we covered Mel Brooks's History of the World Part 1. I mean, there's a scene that's a direct parody, which is, Moses has the 15 commandments. He drops one of the 3 tablets. He goes, "Oi, I mean 10 commandments." So that's sort of directly. But then just sort of the parody, like all the scenes that are in Rome, which on the timeline is, many, many years later after Egypt and the Exodus. But that stylized, like, for example, I'll give you the scene when Mel Brooks's character, Comicus, the stand-up philosopher, enters Caesar's palace. And there is the herald who says, "Welcome to the palace." You have that type of thing in this movie. That type of, what I've been referring to as sandal epic style scene work. And, it's just all part of the, it's all part of the fold there. And also just like, Saturday Night Live has parodied this 100 times, whether it's about Moses or the other sandal epics, which were usually New Testament. They're shot in the same way. A typical Jesus movie, King of Kings or something like that, has a lot in common with 10 Commandments. They're very, very similar productions in their style and in their performance and in the look of it. So yeah, that sort of cultural resonance is still around. Like, this movie people know it even if they've never seen it. I mean, Charlton Heston as Moses, with parting the Red Seas. I mean, that one shot of him with his arms extended and then the Red Seas parting is, I think if you were to do like a baseline test of the most iconic images in all cinema, there's Charlie Chaplin as the tramp, and then Charlton Heston parting the seas are kind of right up there or next to one another. You don't get more iconic, more baseline than those two. Then I think the other thing that about this movie is that because it was shown on TV, broadcast every year for decades and decades and decades, helped cement it as kind of like, one of the foundational movies. This, Wizard of Oz, things like that. And because it's kind of like family
friendly.
friendly.
It would definitely be The Sound of Music.
Oh,
right?
That's the other one. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't remember ever watching the 10 Commandments. I'd have to ask my dad about that. But The Sound of Music, we definitely sat down and watched part of it at least every single year. So I don't even know what holiday that would have been on, Yom HaShoah.
I don't know either. That's a good question. But yeah, that was another one that was always broadcast. I think it was probably ABC television also in the US that did that. Yeah, and then in terms of like, and now, this is just kind of me speculating, but like when this came out, I mean, about a decade before the civil rights movement. And the civil rights movement had the "Let My People Go," the spiritual that I sang in jest earlier. There was at the time a great affinity between the Jewish community and the struggling Black community in the U.S. There's been a lot written about how Jews were very, very involved in that. Of course, the three killings in Mississippi, the Freedom Riders, very famous. I would not be surprised if an element that kind of helped continue that was, and this might sound a little corny, like this movie being on television every year. I think that some of the civil rights leaders, some of the Black leaders who, there was a they saw a reflection in their struggle with Moses. I mean, that I'm not making that's not a new thing. I mean, that's sort of a known thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if this movie helped perpetuate that in some way. The availability of it, the fact that it was just on TV every year and it was a family thing. The whole family's gathered together. You sit on the couch and you watch as much of this 4-hour epic as you can before you fall asleep. So I think that element, that there is an element to it that maybe this did help perpetuate that a little bit. I mean, the other thing to think about also about when this movie was made is it was only 10 years after the end of the Second World War. So for Jewish people to watch this movie and to think about, what had just occurred in Jewish history, I think is something that I hadn't really considered until I watched it again this time as an adult. They don't mention the word Jew once in the film. That struck me about
but
midway
why would
through.
they? Because there's no Jews during that time.
Right.
It's the Hebrews.
They're the Hebrews or the Israelites. But you might think
Right.
a movie being made in the 50s would do that. But the word Jewish and the word Jew, it was just like you say, the Israelites or Hebrews. And then the other thing I thought was interesting in the opening credits, the producers thank the following scholars that helped. They worked as consultants, and one of them was the Rabbi so and so. And I wondered like how many early films have an opening credit thank you with a rabbi's name in it. Probably not that many. Certainly not.
Not only that, Jordan, but if you remember, it also sourced several different texts,
Yeah.
including the Midrash.
Yeah.
How many Americans know what that is?
Very few.
And then, of course, the biggest credit went to the Holy Scriptures,
Right.
which I found super interesting because they're not calling it the Bible. They're not calling it the Old Testament. They're calling it the Holy Scriptures,
Yeah.
as far as I
Yeah.
recall. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I would say that there were some Christian overtones in the film, though it is, of course, about the Hebrews or the Israelites, especially if you recall when Moses is taken out to the desert and he's like, his arms are on this like big pole, almost as if he is hauling a cross, as one might imagine him in a
that was not
situation.
that was not by accident. That was I think that was very much by design. I think that was meant to be the way. Yeah, most of the people involved in this film, there are some Jews involved in the production. I mean, Edward G. Robinson being one.
Cecil B.
Cecil
DeMille.
No, I don't think so.
Did I stump you there, Jordan?
I don't think he's Jewish. What kind of Jewish name is Cecil B. DeMille? Hold on. No, he's not Jewish. Is he? This one's gonna blow me away. No. Cecil B. DeMille. All right, well, he's part Jewish. Cecil B. DeMille's mother, Beatrice, a literary agent and scriptwriter, was the daughter of a German Jew.
No,
but
so he's Jewish.
But she converted to Episcopalianism. I don't think that he identified as a Jew. Oh, this is good. All right, we should leave this all in. This is good. I don't think that Cecil B. DeMille thought of himself as a Jew, and I never thought of him as a Jew. But he, listen, according to the Nazis, he's a Jew because his mother was a Jew, and therefore he is. But
according to Israel, he's a Jew.
Yeah.
He got a Jewish Israeli citizenship as a Jew.
Yeah, okay.
That kind of, definitely resonance is there.
Wow. Okay. All right. This is interesting. This is going to make me, I have to reconsider a lot of this stuff now. That's very interesting. I always thought of him as sort of a classic a classic Hollywood goy of the time, like a John Huston type. But anyhow, but Paramount Pictures at the time, all the early studios were predominantly run by Jews at the time, and one of the screenwriters was Jesse Lasky Jr., and he was the son of Jesse Lasky, who was one of the founders of Hollywood, and he was Jewish. So.
And another of the writers was also Jewish. I remember looking it up, just being like, this is so interesting. There are 4 writers, as I recall. 2 of them are Jewish, and one is a woman, non-Jew, and another Stam American, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like the film itself had a lot of Jewish resonance and a lot of Jewish input, citing the Midrash, citing a rabbi. It's quite fascinating to see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Hollywood at the time, even if you weren't Jewish, you would be familiar with the customs, and you would go to a second Seder, even if you weren't Jewish. I mean, it was part of the ecosystem of the time, and still is to an extent today. Less so, but still is. Wow, my mind is blown about Cecil B. DeMille. I didn't know. So let's talk a little bit more, because you say you watch this with your husband, who knows his stuff better than most. Were there elements that surprised him periodically? Like, oh, they included that. I mean, you mentioned that Aaron being the one to throw down the staff, which then converts into a serpent, and one of the big special effects moments of the film, which was pretty intense for 1950s. It was pretty cool looking. Were there other things that grabbed him?
So I would say kind of the opposite. Like when we were watching The Prince of Egypt, he had many comments, many complaints about how it does not hew to the biblical text. Whereas when we were watching the 10 Commandments, everything was okay, because, it's doing what it should be doing. So, more like that.
Okay, cool. Now, there are 2 different versions of this movie flying around. The version that you watched, did it have Cecil B. DeMille's introduction when he comes out from behind?
Yes.
Yeah, very unusual to see something like that. But what was very funny, I have to say, whenever you watch something, you do have to have sort of an awareness of what's going on. The way he spoke, he comes out and he says, "What you're about to see is X, and we shot it this way." Very unusual for him to make for the director to tell you what you just bought a ticket for. But he ends with saying, "The story takes 3 hours and 39 minutes to unfold. There will be an intermission." So that part is nice. But then he goes, "Thank you for your attention." And then he walks away. And it's like, well, that's how Trump ends his tweets, "Thank you for your attention to this matter," is how Trump really does. I'm like, oh, Cecil B. DeMille, you're reminding me of Trump right now. I'm trying to watch an old classic movie. So I thought that was very, very funny. You can't escape that guy no matter what you do. And then it had the overture, and then there's the intermission break, and then there's the entr'acte where you hear the music again, and then you get to see the big sweeping shots, and I love the scenes of them building the city of Goshen. Of course, there are Jews being whipped by Egyptians. That part I didn't like, but just like seeing these big, they're building obelisks and giant statues of Ramses and whatnot. And I just think it looks great. You can't beat that sort of thing. And then Vincent Price shows up, the guy who was the master builder.
Vincent Price.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's
yes,
somebody you
I
knew.
meant to talk to you about this. I totally know him, but I know him from like old vampire films where he's, kind of creepy. And here he was kind of young and studly looking, maybe.
Yeah, he's
say.
like everyone else in this movie. He's
so
shirtless. All the men are shirtless at least once. Yep. And he plays a villain. He's cruel to the women, and they leave it a little bit unsaid about what he does to the women, but you can get a sense. But he is the great architect until Moses comes in and shows him how it's done. And yeah, of course, I mostly, know him from Michael Jackson's Thriller, but that's the classic Vincent. But when you hear that, you hear that voice, there's no mistaking that voice. Yeah, what's the line that when it says, "Beauty is but a curse to our women," or "Our women's beauty is merely a curse," or the implication that all the Jewesses are sexy, and thus the Egyptians can't keep their hands off of them. It's the way it's phrased is just remarkable. And then they go and stomp in the mud.
One thing that also jumped out at me, in terms of the old style of filmmaking is the opening credits are basically what we would call today the closing credits,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I was thinking about how much more respectful that is for this massive crew. You know, it takes a village to make one of these films,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
today. And it just really occurred to me that this was the better way to do it, actually.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
much more respectful. And
I like that too. I like an opening credits where you see more names. I mean, obviously it's not every name. Like today in the closing credits, they would list like everybody. You know, those closing credits on a big movie last forever because it's everybody at every company involved. You know, every driver that does a little something gets their name in the closing credits. I have some friends that don't. If they go to a movie, they leave when the closing credits are done. You know, they don't start collecting their.
that's my parents, always.
They stay
That's how
till
I
the
grew up.
very, very end. Wow, that's you know,
Very end.
you'd
Yep.
think I would be the guy who does that, but I don't for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah, well, usually it's because I have to pee. It's like, all right, the movie's over. I've been sitting here for 2 hours. I got to go to the bathroom real quick. But maybe I should
Because
do
no
that.
intermissions anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You need the intermission. You race out and buy some popcorn. Yeah, the one other thing that and this probably is something that I did bring up as a kid, or if I'm surprised. So Moses is up there on the mountain. He's getting the Big Ten. And I remember, of course, as a kid, my favorite commandment was, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, or nor their ox nor their ass." And I always thought that was funny, not just because it says ass, because that's funny to a kid, but I just like the specificity of it. Don't covet your neighbor's ox. It's like, well, what if my neighbor doesn't have an ox? But then when they do get to the biggie, "Thou shalt not kill," of course, God is carving the Ten Commandments with you know, look like with fire, with lightning, with some kind of bolt, and it's a special effect, and it goes to the rock and it carves it in. But for that one, "that shalt not kill," it goes straight into the camera. Boom! It shoots you in the face, and then it cuts to a reaction shot of Charlton Heston, like whoa, that was a biggie. That was an important one. I'm going to remember that one. It was a great use of the cinematic language. But then what's the very first thing that Moses does when he comes down from the mountain is that he kills people. He takes the tablets and he says, if you do not live by the law, you shall die by the law. And he flings the tablets at the golden calf, which creates an earthquake, and some of the people fall into the maw of the earth. Now you could say, if you want to get into the midrash, all he did was fling rocks. He didn't know it was going to kill somebody. But from the movie's point of view, it certainly looks like Moses just went downstairs after being told, "Thou shalt not kill," in the boldest of possible manners. That one hits you in the face. He's literally slapped in the face by God saying, "Thou shalt not kill." 15 minutes later, he goes and kills some of the Hebrews because they're having an orgy downstairs. I don't know. I feel like this is a little bit of a... You know, I don't want to give notes to Moses, but I feel like maybe he wasn't listening. I don't know. What's your take on that?
I did not notice that, but of course, Moses doesn't reach the promised land.
No.
He thought it was because he hit a rock, but maybe it was because he threw a rock. So who knows?
Exactly. So that was something. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows how any one of us would react if we're up there hearing the word of God, and the people we've left behind who we thought were going to sort of maintain the home front, you come back and they're having a big party and you weren't invited. Forget it. You might freak out too. So that is.
I don't think it's that he wasn't invited, Jordan. I have to just mention that.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, that was one thing that struck me. And then the other thing is you know, the most famous scene. We talked about the parting of the Red Sea, but when the Red Sea unparts and comes crashing down on all the Egyptians except for Ramses himself, that still has a punch. I mean, that sequence is pretty damn cool. I mean, the special effects today would probably would they even look better? I don't know. They would look cleaner. They would look less like a special effect, but I don't know that it would have less of an impact. I think the way it's done is still pretty good.
Yeah, I would say the one scene that jumped out at me as being the most modern and relevant was not any of that you mentioned. It was when Nefretiri and Sephora were speaking, when Nefretiri comes to warn Sephora that her son is about to die.
Yeah.
And Nefretiri says something like, "You No, I lost Moses when he went to search for his God.
Mm-hmm.
And Sephora says something like, I lost him when he found his
Yeah.
God. And I just love that, communion of women sharing a moment in a real experience of loss over this man
Mm-hmm.
who basically does not see them anymore after he finds his God. And you could see at the very final moment when Moses is like, no, I'm not going to enter the promised land. You leave me. And Sephora's like, I will stay with you. And he just basically brushes her off. She says to him, I love you. And he's like, moving on.
Yeah.
Next, does not hear any of the women in his life
Yeah.
anymore.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because that moment that you talked with the two women was something that did not stick with me at the age of 6. And that jumped out at me too. I was like, oh, that's a pretty modern or at least, insightful moment for all the reasons you just mentioned. I found that quite touching as well. That it showed the negatives to anyone who is called to a higher service, I guess. Someone who's called to a higher service oftentimes has to leave their family, and their family can be proud of that person, but also maybe a little bit upset. And that was a moment of human reality that's devoid of the rest of the film, because the rest of the film is so big and spectacle that this little moment of realism is like, oh, this is a real movie for a second. Hold on.
Yeah.
So that really did strike me. And then, you talked about it earlier, like sort of the quasi-feminist and then certainly not feminist aspects. I mean, most of it is with Nefretiri. I mean, because she's such a sex pot, and she's just like, the moment she sees Moses come in back from his first battle, she's like practically tearing her hair out on the throne next to her father. She just can't get enough of him, and just flinging herself at him. And it's very, she's acting like a drag queen practically. I mean, it's like very over the top, but it's fun to watch. I mean, it's really great.
Yeah.
And I could imagine, I mean, it's the 1950s. There is not a lot of, I could see people watching this movie for its racy values. I mean, you could see some horny teenage boys going like, oh, you got to see this movie. What, the Bible movie? Are you crazy? No, the Pharaoh's daughter's hot to trot. You got to check her out. I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I got to, there is that element to it. I mean, today it's all very, what the kids wear today, it's nothing, but by the standards of the time, it's pretty racy stuff.
There was something in it for everyone, is what we're saying, right, Jordan?
So overall, how do you grade the 10 Commandments?
Oh, I think it doesn't need Amanda Borschel-Dan to say not bad 70 years on. I think we're okay with just leaving it up to the public and lasting opinion.
Yeah, I will also say it's not bad, but I would like to point out that there are some boring parts. But that's okay. That's when you kind of just like go and get a snack and you say, don't turn. Like the scenes, like right before the intermission, there's like there's like a 10-minute sequence that's just like, oh God, just, when he's just like a shepherd living happily, it's just like, oh, this is dead. There's nothing happening. Then luckily things ramp up, and then the intermission. So there are some serious dull patches. I mean, you snooze during the actual Exodus. That's fair. I mean, there's a lot of shots of goats walking around. But it's still it's a not bad movie overall.
Oh, for sure. All right, Jordan. So we are going to attempt to watch the controversial Israeli film Yes by Nadav Lapid for next week.
Okay, good.
And it's been a very big pleasure to have a more schmoozy than usual schmooze with you this week.
Yeah, we'll take a look at Nadav Lapid next week. And then when we were talking about this, 10 Commandments, we sort of mentioned other Bible epics. And then I mentioned a movie, one of the first Hollywood films shot in Israel. And then you mentioned another one, which is super relevant just by its title. So we're going to kind of maybe mention this to the audience. So the first major Hollywood film shot in Israel is called Exodus, which is not about the biblical Exodus, but a different Exodus. And that is a pretty important movie for Israel, and controversial to some degree. We probably should talk about Exodus at some point. It's also really long. And then the other one,
I've never seen it, as you know, right?
We need to do it. It's kind of like it has to be done. Then the other one that I mentioned is, you might think, something that the Reel Schmooze would never cover, but that is Jesus Christ Superstar, because it was shot in Israel. And as far as I can tell, it was the second major Hollywood movie shot in Israel. And of course, the lead character, Jesus Christ, was a Jew. And there are some Jews in the production. What? This just did. Josh Mostel plays Herod in Jesus Christ Superstar. Now, I love Jesus Christ Superstar tremendously. So I would love to cover that at some point. So maybe what we could do is we could ask the listeners, those who made it this far. I think at some point we're going to get to both of them, JC Superstar and Exodus. Which should we do first? We missed the window to do Jesus Christ Superstar on Easter because it's Easter right now, but you could do it at any time. Also, Greek Easter is coming up, and Greek Easter is always,
True.
It's hard to predict when Greek Easter is, but it usually is after non-Greek Easter. So maybe those who are listening, they can do a vote. It's like, would you rather us do Exodus first or JC Superstar next? And that's we'll take it from there.
All right, Jordan, my man, thank you so much for joining me today.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's The Reel Schmooze. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. This episode was produced by Ari Schlacht. Until next time, shalom.